Up third this evening, and 11th overall, Miss Grace Buller of Mice and Women, Why Cinderella Still Matters.
Think of yourself as a child, playing games with your siblings and friends, and acting out stories with your dolls and action figures. If your childhood was anything like mine, many of those games of make-believe were directly inspired by the books and movies you enjoyed. Whether you preferred princesses or knights or ninjas or Jedi or pioneers, your plots and character archetypes were lifted from your favorite stories. Now, when you were at school, say, or doing chores around the house, you probably didn't copy your favorite character's actions verbatim, but they also influenced your decisions and interactions with other people. It is well known that narrative shapes a person's character and world view, and consequently, it is crucial that we carefully consider the stories and characters we expose ourselves and our children to. Do these stories and characters encourage healthy behaviors and choices or unhealthy ones? In recent years, Cinderella, especially in the form of the 1950 animated Disney film, has come under fire for its portrayal of femininity under pressure. Although the critics have a reasonable concern, their criticisms leave room for the question: does Cinderella indeed portray women as weak, helpless creatures who should submit to oppression? Or is its presentation more complex and worthwhile? Before we get into this idea, let us establish one thing. The idea of getting rid of a myth or fairy tale is not new. In his book, The Republic, Plato claims we should get rid of stories which repeat unfavorable ideas about the gods. Much later, the eminent brothers Grimm curated their collection of fairy tales to suit early Victorian morals. Today, carefully curating and editing stories to suit contemporary values remains a common practice, though the advocates and reasons for the removal of certain stories has changed. The feminist movement has criticized many traditional fairy tales for their representation of femininity. Of these fairy tales, Cinderella is perhaps the most widely known, and the 1950 animated Disney version, based on Charles Perrault's variation on this tale, is its most iconic form, both within the United States and abroad. At the same time, the story and its film are also one of the most criticized, on the ground that its heroine depicts good women as silent, subservient creatures. A full treatment of these criticisms is beyond the scope of this speech, but the central complaints and their social implications will be discussed. The justness of these complaints will be evaluated, as well as what they say about society's view of strength and kindness. Does Cinderella present a message of submitting passively while waiting for rescue? Does it present kindness and benevolence as entities which merely support the oppressive institutions at play? Or does it present some worthwhile messages about compassion under fire? Critics argue that Cinderella reinforces the idea that oppressed people, especially oppressed women, should be passive and submissive towards their aggressors. For instance, Cassandra Stover, researcher for the University of Southern California, asserts that Cinderella, along with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Sleeping Beauty, presents women as, quote, beautiful, docile objects waiting for their prince to come. There is some validity to this complaint. In many of the other fairy tales Cinderella is grouped with, the heroine has no notable traits other than her pretty face and her good nature. She may even spend much of her story asleep. While significantly different in plot from these tales, Cinderella leaves room for some of the same concerns. Her stepmother and stepsisters, the more assertive women in the film, are grasping, scheming villains, not the sort of figure any decent person wishes to become. On the other hand, Cinderella, who is soft-spoken and appears unwilling to step on any toes, is presented as the admirable character, the character with whom the audience ought to sympathize. Moreover, she is the one who enjoys the happy ending. The message of passive demure submission to unreasonable demands is demonstrably unhealthy. For instance, a group of university's professors cite the phenomenon of teachers who feel the pressure to give good grades even for unsatisfactory work because they do not wish to be seen as unkind by their students. This pressure, however, begins much earlier in life than one's career. Already in elementary school, One may see the nice, polite child who hesitates to report a bully because they do not want to be mean to the bully. Unfortunately, when this attitude becomes the default setting, the value of kind behavior is lost. It becomes meaningless to the recipient, and it can be used as a tool for those who wish to exploit the innate human desire to be liked. This then raises the question, what is kindness? Kindness, in its proper sense, involves a being in a position of advantage aiding a being in a position of disadvantage out of compassion. Aristotle, for instance, describes kindness as, quote, helpfulness towards someone in need, not in return for anything, nor for the advantage of the helper himself, but for that of the person helped, end quote. When kindness is exhibited this way, it does not imply subservient behavior at all. It, in fact, allows one to imagine a benevolent ruler giving gifts to his subjects, or loving parents sitting up with a sick and fussy infant. Although Cinderella undoubtedly treats her stepfamily better than they deserve, her acts of deliberate self-sacrifice are not for them, but for the mice and birds with whom she shares her attic quarters. Moreover, these creatures are the natural prey of her mother's pet, a cat, and in the case of mice are clearly loathed by the stepfamily. Cinderella's attitude toward them requires a small measure of rebellion against her stepmother. Therefore, contrary to many contemporary feminist critics' claims of weakness, Cinderella's actions display mental and moral strength. Moreover, although kind, gentle people are frequently depicted as unable to hold their own in the real world, such people often enjoy success in the real world because of these qualities. A group of studies based on a social dilemma game, in which participants could choose between benefiting themselves and benefiting their peers, found that, quote, altruistic group members were more likely to be respected, held in higher esteem, and more likely to be chosen as group leaders. When people act kindly towards others, others are more likely both to aid and to follow them, because their actions have made them more sympathetic, likable creatures. Aspects of the story Cinderella reflect this reality. For instance, the mice, birds, and other animals come to Cinderella's aid on multiple occasions, because they are grateful for her aid and pity her position. Well, talking mice and farm animals and birds do not rescue oppressed young women in the real world. A person in Cinderella's position is more likely to receive help if he or she is well liked by peers and neighbors. Acting benevolently towards those in need, therefore, does not inhibit Cinderella from being helped. Rather, even in this harsh world, these actions would increase her likelihood of being helped. Now, let us address some additional concerns. First, Cinderella's stepfamily. As mentioned above, Cinderella treats her odious stepfamily well, which has led some to suggest that maybe she wants to be seen as nice by them, and that this is a concern with Cinderella's interactions with her family. However, Cinderella's interactions with them do not necessarily imply pathological desire to be seen as nice. Instead, she is well aware that they are cruel to her, but she cannot afford to stir up unnecessary trouble for herself. At one point, her stepfamily berates her over the false assumption that she has played a prank on them. They also shut her up when she tries to speak. Although Cinderella's actions in this case do not imply strength, they do point to the reality that people, when faced with mistreatment of various levels, often cannot afford to make trouble for themselves. More importantly, she is willing to stand up to her stepmother when there is some purpose to standing. For instance, she carries her point that, as an eligible young maiden, she should be allowed to go to the ball. Additional concern has been expressed over the possibility that courage and kindness can compete with each other. A study on character in the workplace found that, quote, strengths of the heart tend not to co-occur with strengths of the head, unquote. This study went on to suggest that, quote, we need to choose carefully the strengths we target in direct interventions because there may be unintended effects on other strengths, end quote. In other words, the presence of softer virtues like kindness can, in certain contexts, inhibit the development of tougher virtues like courage and perseverance. For a story like Cinderella, one might argue that courage is the more important virtue, but this claim overlooks the nature of kindness Cinderella displays. Cinderella's benevolence toward the mice, as has been previously established, not only benefits a group of weaker, needier creatures, but also goes against the expectations set by her stepmother. To act kindly in this situation would require both compassion for the one being aided and courage to act, even when one's actions might be perceived as odd by society. Thus, Cinderella's kindness does not interfere with the development of courage. Rather, it demands that courage be learned alongside compassion and gentleness. We have determined by now, I hope, that Cinderella's presentation of virtuous femininity has value, and that the story cannot be written off as simply a tool used to uphold harmful social structures. However, this is just one film out of many, and people won't and shouldn't watch one movie exclusively. What is the larger significance of this conversation? First, we have the inherent human need to love and be loved, to care and to be cared for. Although this need can be exploited to manipulate people into giving in to unreasonable, unjust expectations, we cannot hope to win by weeding it out. A world where people do not care for each other is depressing. No one would want to live there. However, by elevating boldness above all other traits, we risk cultivating this very world. Boldness for boldness' sake quickly devolves into bulliness and brassiness. However, we have a third choice: to regain our understanding of kindness as helping someone in need. This definition leaves ample room for the possibility that an oppressor of the needy must be faced. Standing up for the downtrodden in the face of injustice is a noble act. In a tale about a sword-wielding knight, such behavior would be called heroic. Coming from a weary, browbeaten kitchen maid, it demonstrates at least as much courage. So, what if we do not recognize those who quietly stand for those around them? What if we see only bold and even aggressive actions as courageous? Without compassion, this behavior is meaningless. If only boldness is encouraged and not benevolence towards the smaller and weaker, then we have only created a new generation of bullies. On the other hand, children who have been raised to see that even mistreated, marginalized servant girls can aid the helpless mice are prepared to see that even they, small and bullied though they may be, can help those who are less fortunate. Thank you.